It all began on an unusually cold autumn night, the kind of night where the air clings to your skin and every sound echoes in a haunting resonance. Lucy had just moved into the old, creaky house on the outskirts of a small town called Denwick. The house was a beautiful relic from another era, with its tall, arched windows and ivy covered walls. But there was something about the place that felt off. The locals had warned her in their own way about the history of the land. They spoke in hushed tones, exchanged glances, and mentioned vague stories about something dark that roamed the woods at night. But Lucy had dismissed them as nothing more than folklore, small town superstition. She was a woman of reason and logic, not one to be swayed by ghost stories. Lucy had always loved the solitude of the countryside. She had grown tired of the constant noise of the city and longed for a place where she could breathe, think, and perhaps finally write that novel she had always talked about. The house in Denwick seemed perfect. It was isolated, surrounded by dense woods, and the backyard was vast, stretching into a dark forest that seemed to go on forever. On that first night, as she unpacked her belongings and arranged her new life in this old house, Lucy felt a strange sensation creeping over her. She couldn't pinpoint what it was. Perhaps it was the silence that was too quiet, or the wind that seemed to whisper through the trees. But something gnawed at her, a feeling of being watched. Shrugging it off, she made herself a cup of tea and settled into the worn leather armchair by the large bay window. She looked out in the night, the backyard, bathed in the pale light of the full moon. The shadows of the trees danced across the grass, and everything seemed calm, peaceful even. And then she heard it, the howl. It was distant at first, almost imperceptible, like the wind twisting through the trees. But as it grew louder, Lucy's heart began to pound. It was a long, mournful sound, filled with an eerie, unnatural resonance that sent chills down her spine. It wasn't like any animal she had ever heard before. Her rational mind tried to explain it away. It's just a wolf, she told herself. Maybe a coyote. This is the countryside after all. But deep down, she knew that wasn't right. There was something wrong with that howl. It echoed with a strange intelligence, something far more menacing than an ordinary animal. Lucy stood up and walked to the window, peering into the night. The trees loomed ominously at the edge of the yard, their branches like twisted, skeletal fingers reaching out to grab at the moon. She could see nothing unusual, but the feeling of being watched intensified. Then she saw it. A flicker of movement at the far edge of the yard, where the trees met the darkness of the forest. A tall, shadowy figure, just barely visible in the moonlight. It was standing on two legs, its body hunched, and its eyes were glowing, a fierce yellow that cut through the darkness like twin flames. Lucy gasped and stumbled back from the window, her tea spilling onto the floor. The figure remained motionless, staring at her with those burning eyes. She couldn't breathe. Her mind raced, searched for an explanation. A person? An animal? No. It was too large to be human, but too upright to be anything else. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure melted back into the shadows of the trees, disappearing into the forest. The howl came again. This time closer, more insistent. Lucy's heart was in her throat. She grabbed her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed the local sheriff's office. The phone rang and rang, but no one answered. She was alone. For the rest of the night, Lucy sat in the armchair, her eyes glued to the window, waiting, listening. The howls came and went, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away, but the creature did not return. When the first light of dawn finally broke, Lucy felt a small sense of relief wash over her. She had survived the night. Whatever that thing was, it was gone now. But as she looked out the window once more, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. In the soft, dewy grass of her backyard, leading from the edge of the forest to just beneath her window, were large, unmistakable paw prints. And they weren't just paw prints, they were massive, like those of a wolf, but far too big. The tracks were deep, pressed into the earth with an unnatural weight, and they ended right at the spot where the figure had been standing the night before. Lucy swallowed hard, her mind reeling. She wasn't dealing with an ordinary animal. Whatever had been in her backyard last night wasn't something she could explain away with logic, and she had the sinking feeling that this was only the beginning.